reignited. What's going on, y'all? AttorneyTom here, back with another USCSB React. Today's video is titled Fire in Baton Rouge. As always, stick around to the end of the video where I give my final verdict. Let's jump right into it.
November 22nd, 2016. The ExxonMobil refinery in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A fire erupted during maintenance activities, severely burning 4 workers. The fire occurred when operators inadvertently removed bolts that secured a piece of pressure-containing equipment to a type of valve known as a plug valve. When the operators then attempted to open the valve, it came apart and released flammable isobutane, which formed a vapor cloud that quickly ignited.
During our investigation, the CSB learned that the operators attempting to open the plug valve were following accepted practices within the refinery.
But just because a practice is accepted in a single entity or at a single refinery does not necessarily mean the practice is safe. An entity can promote unsafe activity or unsafe practices. And in fact, as a catastrophic personal injury lawyer, you can absolutely make the argument that if a practice was accepted inside of an entity and that practice was unsafe, well, then the management, the leadership team failed the employees because they failed to do a proper risk analysis of the practices that they went ahead and allowed their employees to operate with.
Unfortunately, those practices lacked a safety hazard analysis, which needlessly put the workers at greater risk.
Exactly. I'm not saying I knew exactly what she was going to say, but I'm saying exactly I knew what she was going to say. USCSB, you need to reach out, collab with me. Let's do a collab video, even though I know you won't do that because obviously I'm a biased catastrophic personal injury attorney and you're trying to be a neutral governmental agency. But still, let's do a video.
The management of safety is critical to the protection of workers and the integrity of facility operations.
The fire at ExxonMobil's Baton Rouge refinery occurred in the sulfuric acid alkylation unit. There, isobutane and olefins are converted into a major component of gasoline through a reaction involving sulfuric acid. On the day of the incident, 2 operators were preparing to put a spare isobutane pump into service. To do so, the operators needed to open the pump's inlet plug valve. That plug valve was operated manually. A hand wheel and a piece of equipment called a gearbox were connected to the valve by a support bracket. The gearbox uses gears to make it easier to turn the valve stem into the open or closed position. The operators turned the hand wheel on the spare pump's inlet plug valve, but the gearbox was not working properly and the valve would not open. When the gearbox was malfunctioning, it was an accepted practice in the alkylation unit for operators to remove the gearbox so that a pipe wrench could be used to turn the valve stem and open the valve.
So immediately before we get further into this, as a lawyer, and if I was handling this case, I would want to know how often the gearbox malfunctioned, why it malfunctioned. Is there something that could have been done differently? Perhaps a different gearbox or perhaps a different design? What we're looking for is a potential products liability case or maybe even a design defect case. It appears that this gearbox had a reputation of breaking down or broke down enough to establish a well-known practice to manually close the valve with a wrench when and if it broke down. Let's keep going.
The gearbox was connected to the valve body by the support bracket using bolts. The operators removed 4 vertical bolts from the valve. But unknown to the operators, these bolts also secured a critical pressure-containing component of the valve known as the top cap. Approximately 3% of the numerous plug valves in the refinery's alkylation unit were designed so that the gearbox support bracket attached to the top cap. With this 30-plus-year-old design, removal of the gearbox support bracket can have catastrophic consequences.
What did he just say? 3% 3% of the gearboxes had this certain design defect. Let's go back and listen to exactly what he said again.
Approximately 3% of the numerous plug valves in the refinery's alkylation unit were designed so that the gearbox support bracket attached to the top cap. With this 30-plus-year-old design, removal of the gearbox support bracket can have catastrophic consequences.
Wow, absolutely. The design of this valve is going to be at the heart of this case. If only 3% of the valves or hubcaps or whatever they called them in the factory have this sort of fatal design, why didn't they just replace them? And additionally, the design is over 30 years old. Employers have a duty, refineries have a duty to continuously update their safety equipment as newer technology comes out. Just because something might have been industry standard 30 years ago doesn't mean that it's industry standard today.
Approximately 97% of the valves were newer models with updated design that did not connect the gearbox support bracket to pressure-containing equipment, making it less likely to remove the incorrect bolts. With bolts removed from the top cap, one of the operators attempted to open the valve by rotating the valve stem with a pipe wrench, while the second operator stood by and observed. The valve immediately failed and came apart. Pressurized isobutane escaped from the valve, forming a flammable white vapor cloud. The two operators warned others in the area and directed them to evacuate. Approximately 2,000 pounds of isobutane released to the atmosphere. The vapor cloud likely found an energized welding machine roughly 70 feet away from the initial release and ignited. The resulting fire seriously injured one ExxonMobil employee and 3 contractors working in the area.
I know this doesn't really make a difference for the purposes of this video, but from a lawyer's perspective, the difference between an employee and a contractor could be huge in a potential situation like this. Meaning, if you represent the employee, they might not have the same rights as representing a third-party contractor who got injured, even if the injuries were the same or equal from the exact same event. Just something to think about.
Our investigation into the incident revealed that management at the ExxonMobil Baton Rouge refinery were accepting of operators in the alkylation unit removing malfunctioning plug valve gearboxes without adequate written procedures or training.
The CSB also found that although refinery operators did receive training on hard-to-operate valves, the training did not specifically address how to remove an inoperable gearbox from the older plug valve model.
In our safety bulletin, we outlined 3 key lessons learned from this incident.
The first key lesson is to establish detailed and accurate written procedures for workers performing potentially hazardous work. This is especially important when different types of equipment or configurations exist that could cause confusion. A second key lesson.
Hold on. Before we move on to the next key lesson number 1, establish detailed and accurate written procedures for workers performing potentially hazardous work. Y'all, this is literally the bare minimum. And this is what drives me absolutely crazy. I see this all the time. It is literally disgusting how many people get hurt year after year in these industries, and they have never received any sort of formal training. There's no formal literature that their company provides them. It is just a free-for-all, and people get hurt year after year. As I've said many times on this channel before, I'm fine with going out of business. I don't need to exist. A catastrophic personal injury lawyer doesn't need to exist. I'll change. I'll be a full-time YouTuber. I don't need the work, but it keeps happening. This is literally the bare minimum. Key lesson number 2, provide training to ensure that workers can perform all anticipated job tasks. How is this not common sense? And I know it's not, because I see it. I'm gonna have a heart attack watching these videos.
Training should include a focus on processes and equipment to improve hazard awareness and help prevent chemical incidents.
In our safety bulletin, we emphasize the hierarchy of controls. This is a method of evaluating safeguards to provide effective risk reduction. Within the hierarchy of controls, an engineering control, such as improved valve design, is more effective than a lower-level administrative control, such as assign warning workers that the gearbox support bracket connects to pressure-containing components.
The CSB found that the 30-plus-year-old valves left in the refinery were not explicitly required to be updated to the safer design. That is because the older design did technically adhere to current industry standards, which call for items like gearboxes to be capable of removal without affecting pressure-containing parts.
And you see, that is a defense that they use. They say technically it complied to industry standards, technically. But when you're suing for negligence or design defect or product defect, that doesn't really matter. It factors into the accounts, right? It might be a single factor, but when you look at the totality of everything, you say, listen, yes, technically, this was an industry standard, but any reasonable person could have known that this was dangerous. If you were in this industry, you knew that these things needed to be updated. And the only reason why they didn't update them is to save a couple bucks because, yeah, it costs a little bit of money to replace the valves. And technically, these are okay. But look, there are safer alternatives available. And we know there are safer alternatives available because 97% of your refinery has the safer alternative. I guarantee you, if I called the lawyers who handled this case and we talked to them about it, the chicken defense would be these valves were industry standard. I guarantee you.
That could be accomplished by removing 2 horizontal bolts that connect the support bracket directly to the gearbox, rather than the 4 vertical bolts that secure the support bracket to the top cap. But on the day of the incident, the operator did not remove the 2 horizontal bolts.
The American Petroleum Institute, an industry trade association, says in its safety guidance for improving human performance to make it easy for people to do things right and hard for them to do things wrong.
All right, we don't need to keep watching anymore. Absolutely, ExxonMobil is liable for causing these injuries. It is just disgusting. The lack of oversight, the lack of willingness to put proper safety equipment into the facilities that keeps driving these incidents to happen again and again and again. Before I have a full-on heart attack, let's end this video. Thank you so much for watching, y'all. My goal is always to make content worthy of your time. I hope you at least found this educational. And as always, leave any comments, questions, concerns down below. I read them all the time, and I'm always looking for more videos to provide insight on and react to. All right, y'all. Talk to you later. Bye.
He's a catastrophic injury attorney who accidentally became a YouTuber. Attorney Tom.